Hi. Um, there's always so many things that I wanted to talk about, or I think what's the next best thing to talk about. Um, and I'm kind of going at the moment by things that happen in the day, and it reminds me of stuff. So something that kind of came into my head today is how hard it is to go back to work after you have lost a baby. And I think it probably varies depending on what you do. But if you work with people like I do, it's very, very difficult to go back to work, to face people when they know what's happened, but also even talking to people who don't know what's happened, because when I see clients and I'm with them for like an hour or more, when you're a woman especially, I think the most relatable subject is, do you have any children? And it's completely natural. Like, before I lost Brandon, that's a question that I would ask, because if I'm with somebody for an hour or more and we're talking, it's a subject that everyone can talk about and laugh or cry or moan or whatever. So I'm guilty of asking the same questions. However, on the other side of it, when you've lost a baby and somebody asks you, how many children do you have? It always leaves me like, oh God, because it's very difficult. I don't want to say, I've got one, she's 9, her name's Alicia, and not say I've got 2 and forget Brandon, because you're stuck in a position where if I say I've got 2, this is going to open a can of worms, and are we both ready for this? Because it doesn't stop at, oh, you've got 2 children. Oh, girl and boy, or girls or boys, and how old are they? And that it will just keep going. So for me, I either have to not say that I have 2, or I have to be prepared to go down that road. But when people are paying you and they're your clients, you've got the other thing of, you don't want to make them feel awkward. And sometimes it does, but you don't want to feel guilty. So it's a really tricky situation, because if I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed and upset by it all one day, and I go into work and somebody asks me that loaded question the first session, then I think I'm feeling emotional. I don't want to pretend I didn't have Brandon, but I'm not ready to talk about it with you because you're a stranger, and that would be really awkward if I cry all over you. And then because they're paying me, it's almost like they're the ones who dictate the subject and how much you're going to talk about that. So if I was then to turn around, it started kind of going, they were asking about Brandon, and I said, he passed away, If I wanted to stop that conversation there, but I didn't want to be rude, it's a really tricky thing. So in the beginning, when I first went back to work, the first client that I had, like I never met her before, she was a new client, and I kind of wasn't ready for it as quickly, because she lied down and she started talking about her children, getting them to school, blah 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 blah, and then she said straight away, have you got any children? I thought, oh bloody hell, oh God, like I'm not ready for this right now. And I felt like I almost didn't even think about it before I went back to work, because I didn't think that it didn't come into my head that was going to be a thing. So I didn't think, shall I say, shall I not say, I just said, well, actually, I've got 2, but unfortunately one of them passed away in 2019, and I know that the woman felt really awkward, and then I felt like I had to change the subject. She was lovely but didn't really know what to say, and I get that. And then I had to change that. It's just all, it's all a big can of worms, and it's all a bit awkward. Yeah, and it's tricky. It's tricky to go back to work anyway, but very tricky when you work with people. Then you've got clients you do know, and you know, we've known them for quite a few years, and some of them knew what happened, and I have to say, like, most of them were absolutely lovely and like messaged us beforehand, and you know, or while it was happening, you know, while we lost him, they knew the story and knew what was going on and wished us well and everything. And then coming back into work, I even got some emails beforehand saying that I'm so sorry, and you know, everything, lovely email, and you know, if you don't want to talk about it, we you know, we won't talk about it, and da 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 da. So they were the easier ones, but then at the same time, because they know you, then as soon as you see them and they kind of go, oh, I'm sorry, and then that just makes you feel like you want to cry, because you know that there's that personal kind of relationship there. And I'm quite lucky that I didn't have to go back straight away. Unlike Kevin went back because it's our business. He went back literally after a week. I don't know how he did it, I really don't. And I know that it wasn't really like he had a choice. It's so difficult because he had people in like a couple of months before we had him, and then they didn't know that we'd lost him, and then they came back in and would say, you know, how is he? Is he here? Congratulations. Not knowing the whole journey we've been on. And then Kevin was having to go into work every day with situations like that, having to go over what happened every day. And again, he's in a room, people are kind of paying him, so he can't break down. He has to be almost like robotic about it and just get on with it. And in any other job, when it's not your business, if it was like, if you was a teacher, or you know, you kind of worked in the public sector or whatever, you'd get signed off and you know, be off for 6 months. But yeah, when it's your business or it's private or whatever, you just have to get on with it and go back, and it's really, really, really difficult. And you kind of, I think, get used to it ish, but when you're having a moment, or there's particularly hard times like around anniversaries, or you know, the birthdays, anything like that, Mother's Day, Father's Day, you literally just want just the world to stop for that day, and it's very hard to go, I can't cope with this, like like it's very, very overwhelming. And I try and look at it from both sides, and you know, I know that it must sometimes feel quite awkward for somebody else, knowing whether they should bring it up, how much to say, what to say. Like I get it. It's a really tricky situation to know how to be with someone and if they're open to it. And I think, you know, if the shoe is on the other foot, I would probably, you know, say how sorry I am, and leave the rest up to them if they want to talk about it or not. So yeah, I get it. It's difficult for everybody, but what's made me bring this up tonight is, yeah, just a couple of little incidents that I've had at work recently that have been a bit awkward, but in a way which is like, the people weren't being horrible, they just you know, asked the wrong questions. Or like, it's worse if you say what's happened, you know, because you're put in a position where you can't. So like, for instance, have you got any children? How many have you got? So even if you say, even if I choose to go, I've got one, she's a 9-year-old, no, name's Alicia, then the next question might be, are you going to have any more? Or have you thought about having any more? And then it's like, oh God, now I'm not going to go no. So now I kind of have to tell them about Brandon and what happened. So now we're going to get into that. And then sometimes it's even gone after that, are you going to have any more? And then you're just in like this massive web of like having to completely expose how you feel about everything, and yeah, keep a lid on it and do your job and be professional and not have a meltdown and all of those things. So people say to me, you know, if you're having a bad day, you'd never know, because you're walking around and, you know, you smile and, you know, you'd never know what's going on behind there. And honestly, I think it is just that I am really, really good at putting a face on things, because I've had to over the years anyway, just because of my background in like singing and being on stage. And, you know, if you're on stage, and there were many times where I had an argument with like one of my bandmates, and then had to get on stage and pretend that we were best friends and everything was amazing. So I've kind of grown up like doing that and having to fake it, if you like. So I suppose it's given me a good background to do it again now in a real life situation. But yeah, it's a tricky one. And that is just part of the journey that you don't expect afterwards. You don't expect it to be an ongoing life thing where you learn new stuff about how the rest of your life's going to be every single day. So yeah, there's more stuff to come like this, but just being prompted by certain things that people have said recently and stuff at work and so on, I thought I would give a little download of that information while the subject was on my mind.